Welcome to the Explainer. All right, we're diving right into a concept that literally touches every single aspect of our modern lives, yet we almost never talk about it out loud. Today, we're unpacking Naomi Wolf's absolute game changer of a critique on modern beauty standards. We're going to look at some incredibly powerful ideas that might just completely flip how you see the workplace, the media, and honestly, society as a whole. Let's get into it. We're digging into the central thesis of Wolf's famous book, The Beauty Myth. And right off the bat, we kind of need to toss our usual perspectives out the window. This text argues that beauty isn't some biological reality or some timeless evolutionary truth. Instead, she argues it's a deliberate political weapon. It's basically a tool used to manage and control the social order, especially as women have gained more material and legal power over the years. Woolf kicks things off with this incredibly powerful quote from Virginia Woolf. "It is far more difficult to murder a phantom than a reality." It perfectly sets the stage for our explainer, right? It really gets at this idea that an invisible societal concept, a phantom, is way harder to defeat than a physical barrier. Think about it. You can strike down a discriminatory law, but how on earth do you dismantle a massive cultural hallucination? And that brings us to this massive, striking paradox. Do liberated women actually feel free? Why do so many affluent, highly educated, legally liberated Western women still feel this intense, honestly paralyzing pressure about how they look? These are women who have shattered massive historical barriers, but there's a secret underlife kind of poisoning that freedom. Why do things like body shape, faces, and aging matter so incredibly much to women who, on paper, seemingly have it all? Section 1, Defining the Beauty Myth. To really grasp this paradox, we need to redefine what beauty actually means in this context. So, the beauty myth is defined here as a political and economic currency system that assigns value to women in a vertical hierarchy, essentially to maintain male dominance. What's fascinating is that she strips away the romance completely. It's not about aesthetics or art, it's an expression of power. It's a system designed to divide women, forcing them to unnaturally compete for resources using a currency they don't even control. This comparison perfectly captures the paradigm shift of the whole book. See, society constantly feeds us this line that beauty is universal, changeless, and just driven by biological evolution. The idea that strong men naturally seek out beautiful women. But Woolf says, hold on, no, that's a social fiction. She argues beauty is actually a politically and economically constructed currency system, sort of like the gold standard. The ideals we chase, they change rapidly, not because of evolution, but because the current power structure and the economy need them to. Section 2, the Iron Maiden. So if beauty is a constructed system, how does it actually trap people? Woolf uses this really vivid metaphor, the Iron Maiden. It was an old medieval German torture device shaped like a smiling, beautiful young woman. She posits that society basically censors real women's faces and bodies, trapping them instead inside this rigid, unforgiving hallucination of perfection. The original Iron Maiden looked lovely on the outside, but inside it was lethal. Woolf argues the modern beauty myth operates exactly the same way. It forces our attention onto this impossible, smiling mold while completely silencing the diverse, messy reality of actual women. Section 3, the third shift. Let's move from theory to the nitty-gritty reality of the modern workplace. 99.6. Just let that number sink in for a second. According to a Chase Manhattan Bank estimate cited in the text, American women were working an absolutely staggering 99.6 hours each week. As women entered the workforce in droves, they didn't magically stop doing domestic work. They just piled professional work on top of it. But somehow, it gets worse. To effectively checkmate women's massive entry into the professional world, society imposed what Woolf calls a third shift. So you've got the first shift at the office, the second shift at home with domestic labor, and then this third shift, the grueling, wildly expensive, and inexhaustible labor of achieving beauty. It's literally designed to drain women's surplus energy, chip away at their confidence, and specifically eat up the very financial resources they're working so incredibly hard to earn in the first place. Section 4, Professional Beauty Qualifications. Now let's look at how this third shift actually gets institutionalized at work. Enter the PBQ, or the Professional Beauty Qualification. It's this unwritten but widely institutionalized condition for women getting hired or promoted. Wolf argues that the workplace basically twists the legal concept of a genuine occupational requirement, forcing women to treat their physical appearance as a literal job requirement. So as women started climbing the corporate ladder, the goalposts suddenly moved. Beauty became a mandatory qualification for power, acting as a really sneaky mask for blatant employment discrimination. Think about TV journalism. It's a perfect example. For male anchors, maturity, lines, gray hair, these are seen as markers of individuality and power. They look distinguished. But for female anchors on that exact same broadcast, they're held to this intense standard of heavy makeup, youth, and professional prettiness. As Wolf points out, this double standard renders the women generic and completely replaceable. For a woman on screen, growing older literally means erasure. The text brings up the famous dismissal of anchorwoman Christine Kraft, who was allegedly fired for being too old, too unattractive, and not deferential to men. She was subjected to these ridiculous makeovers and clothing charts that the guys never had to deal with. It's a prime example of how these completely subjective appearance standards are weaponized to toss out highly competent, experienced women. The PBQ can publicly humiliate a woman and strip away her livelihood just based on how she looks. Section 5, the legal catch-22. So, how do working women navigate this legally? Well, it's a bit of a nightmare. Should a woman just dress femininely? You might assume that if the system demands beauty, playing by traditional feminine rules is the safest bet to protect your job, right? Let's take a look at what the case law actually says. Wolf points out that dressing femininely can legally result in a woman being blamed for her own sexual harassment. In the devastating case of Vinson versus Meritor Savings Bank, a woman's so-called provocative dress, which was literally just wearing standard clothes, was used to argue that she welcomed harassment from her boss. The law basically looked through the male gaze, twisting her appearance into being her own fault. Okay, so if looking too feminine is legally dangerous and invites blame, maybe the answer is to avoid it. Should she adopt a stricter, more masculine business look to be safe? Well, no, because the legal system is a total trap. In Hopkins v. Pricewaterhouse, a top earner was denied a massive promotion specifically because she was told to walk and dress more femininely. But then you have policewoman Nancy Fautel, who was fired for looking, quote, too much like a lady. Do you see the maze here? Women are punished for being too feminine, they're punished for not being feminine enough, and they're penalized for trying to adopt a neutral male uniform. Legally speaking, women literally do not have a thing to wear. Section 6, the economic reality. Let's pull back the curtain and look at the actual money behind all of this. So, who actually benefits from all this exhaustion? The text argues that the beauty myth operates as an ideology to literally make women feel worth less. In 1984, women made 64 cents to a man's dollar. The contemporary economy absolutely depended on keeping women's labor cheap. Think about it. If women felt confident in their actual merit, they'd demand equal pay, right? So the beauty myth steps in to constantly erode that confidence, ensuring they stay underpaid. Check out these numbers. When you compare traditional, heavily female professions like secretaries or bank tellers making around $10,000 to $13,000 back then, against a display profession like Miss America making well over $150,000, the message is loud and clear. Wolf highlights how society financially rewards women's bodies way more than their professional skills. It teaches women that their ultimate economic lifeline isn't their brain, it's their adherence to the beauty standard. Will women ever be truly liberated as long as their primary societal value is dictated by the currency of beauty? We want to leave you with this provocative thought from our explainer today. If beauty is a currency completely controlled by the very institutions women are trying to break into, can true equality ever actually be achieved while playing by those rules? Until we recognize and shatter this invisible cage, the full promise of liberation just might remain out of reach. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. I hope it gives you a totally new lens on the world around you.